If you could build the character who is your ideal student, what sort of components would you put in it and how would you structure it?
The first component I will put in is open-mindedness, right? The first brick, if I was to make my own student, would be the brick of open-mindedness. So like I always tell the student, just have an open mind and you can learn from anybody and you can learn from anything. The next brick I will use is the brick of curiosity. You want to be curious. There's so much to learn. Even if you live for 1,000 years, you will not even learn up to 10% of everything that there is on earth to learn. The next component I will put in my ideal student is who loves teaching. Teaching is the fastest way to learn. So you must be generous with your knowledge. You must be generous with your experience. When classes are going on and you're making your own contributions, I give you my perspective from my time in Nigeria and Canada, and you tell me what happened in Iran, what happened in France, what happened in Spain or in Japan. I learn as much from my students as they learn from me.
As someone who straddles the academic and entrepreneurial worlds, what is your take on today's startup ecosystem? Hello guys, today we have Ndinanake Udom, a LinkedIn connection and associate faculty at City University of Seattle in Canada.
It's a pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to it since the invitation.
Yes, sir, brother. How are you?
I'm perfectly fine. The weather is great. Nothing to complain about.
That's amazing. So you said earlier that you were teaching.
Yeah.
How did you get into teaching and what's the backstory and journey behind it?
How did I get into formal teaching or informal teaching? Because I do believe we are all teachers. There's hardly anybody that can say you've never taught a friend how to do something, how to check something on the phone or on the car. So we've all been teaching, right? But I guess you're talking about formal teaching. So way back in the university, I was always providing peer tutorship or tutorials to my friends. I think that was where I started enjoying the art of teaching. It's one of the simplest and most productive ways to learn. If you want to teach somebody something, you first need to spend some time learning it well enough to be able to teach. Someone once said to teach something once is to learn it twice. So being someone who is so much into learning, feeling that there's always so much knowledge out there to grasp, I then leaned in towards teaching more in the last 5 years. I'd been in corporate finance. I'm a professional accountant. And I only had that industry experience to prepare me for actual teaching. And so when I got on the flight and came to Canada, there was really only one thing on my mind. And post my MBA, predominantly the only jobs I really looked forward to were teaching jobs. And I'm super excited that things have really progressed way better than I thought they would. I enjoy every class. Every class is unique. You meet students from different parts of the world. You get to learn more from different cultures, you learn from their experiences, and of course, you make new friends along the way.
Yeah, of course. Sort of just to linger on this topic, what's your philosophy when it comes to teaching a subject? Is there sort of like a structure you follow, or how do you approach it?
Okay, there's a teaching philosophy and then there's teaching structure. So my teaching philosophy is premised on the fact that knowledge has to be transformative. It has to rub off on you personally and then, of course, rub off positively on the broader society. So I do not just believe in learning something that is stale or obsolete. So why then will I teach it? So right ahead of every class, I try to connect learning objectives with how they can personally rub off on the students positively. Because people are more motivated to learn something when they know that there's really something that this knowledge can do for them, right? And of course, we learn so that we can also make positive contributions to society. So ahead of every class, I prepare my class in such a way that I'm able to, at every point in time, show students exactly what they're going to get from the class beyond the learning objectives that they have on the slides, how it's going to benefit them personally. Then my teaching structure is not fixated because, like I said earlier, every class has its own dynamics. Sometimes you're teaching students who are vast on the subject, have advanced knowledge of the subject matter, And then sometimes you have students who are new to the subject matter. And on other instances, you have those students who are somewhere in between. You're lucky if you will have all your students in one of these categories, because then you now know how to proceed. But oftentimes you can have a class mixed with people who know so much, who know little, and then who know something in between. So the challenge you'll always face is, how do I teach in such a way where those who know little or nothing about the subject matter can learn without boring those who know so much about it? Okay? Because you imagine yourself learning something that you already know so much about. At a point, you might easily become disinterested. So, in order to structure changes as the class changes, depending on what I'm teaching and who exactly I'm teaching. But I always try to first understand exactly what everybody knows about the subject matter. It just gives me a feel, right? It's always an icebreaker. Oh, no, my main icebreaker in every class is teaching people how to say my name because they tend to find the name a little bit challenging. That usually helps in diffusing the tension. Everybody gets more relaxed, and I tell them, okay, once you've gone past the name, you've gone past probably the most challenging aspect of the course. And then I try to understand exactly what people already understand or know about what we have to learn on the day, right? So that determines the pace at which I will move. That determines the examples I will cite, right? Whatever preparation I've made before the class is usually tentative. I can change it depending on the feel and the vibes I get from the class. So structure is not fixated. It changes depending on the dynamics of the class.
So you moved here years ago. And what's the main core difference between Nigeria and here, and sort of how do the two cultures go about?
Nigeria is a long way from Canada, oceans apart, time zones apart. One is in Africa, one is in Canada. Both of them are beautiful countries in their own right. Many good things about the countries. And then, of course, there are certain things you will miss about Nigeria when you're here. And there are certain things that you will wish you could enjoy in Nigeria while you're here. Both societies are different, right? The Nigerian culture, pretty much the African culture, is a communal culture, right? So pretty much everybody knows you personally, and you also know people personally. But there are many things I love about the Canadian culture, which I will focus on, right? It's a society where if you're really clear about what you want and you're willing to put the work, you tend to get results a whole lot faster than you probably will get in other countries. I haven't been to many countries in the world, right? But based on the interactions I've had interactions with lots of students, and I have friends that cut across multiple cultures, right? The Canadian, I'm not just limiting it to the school environment, right? In my own opinion and from my own observation, the Canadian culture is a culture that rewards hard work. I'm saying it because in certain societies, you can put in the work and get frustrated when the result you're getting out of it is not commensurate to the effort you're putting in. When I got on the flight coming down here to Canada, there was only one thing on my mind: to come and be a university professor. Not many people have that ability to make that kind of bold statement in certain countries, and 1 year down the line, you're actually teaching in a university, right? There's something that gives you the right to have dreams. Is the fact that the system may not be perfect, but you have confidence in the system to work, and then if you put in the right result, you will get what you want out of it. I came in to do an MBA. And right from the first classes, when the professors always ask, hey, why are you here in Canada and what would you like to do? There was only one thing I kept saying: hey, I want to be a professor. Hey, I want to be a professor. And it was very important because I discovered that building relationships here is essential if you want to succeed. The very first teaching gig I got, the very first teaching job I got was a remote job. I was teaching in a school in Manitoba. I got it through one of my professors where I was doing my MBA. He just told me, hey, I've given your resume to this school. They will call you for an interview. The interview didn't last more than 3 minutes, if there was an interview. He just told me, we got your details from this professor. Are you available to teach this course? So it's a society that rewards you when you put in the work, and then you build on the kind of connections that will help you get to where you want to go, right? If you rely extensively on wishful thinking, you might become frustrated. So it's a merit-based system. And that was what really motivated me to come here. Because in certain societies, probably it's not who deserves it most that gets it. It might be someone who is less deserving, but because of relationship you have with others, your competence then becomes relegated to the background, right? But completely different here. The work environment is great. People are respectful. You get rewarded for whatever effort you put in. And at the end of the day, when you get home, you find a sense of fulfillment, knowing that you're doing exactly what you want to do. Because there's a level of frustration that comes with being something or doing something that is different from the way you perceive yourself, right? So if you see yourself as a teacher and you're stuck doing something that you feel is not you, oftentimes there's this intrapersonal conflict in your mind that I should be someone else, I should be somewhere else. It's always hard to make peace with yourself. But here, I'm talking about my own experience and from the experiences I've shared with friends around me. Once you set your mind to something and you're willing to put in the effort and build in the right relationship, you tend to get the right results.
It seems that when you came here, you were so crystal clear on your path. So the question that I have is, how did you get to that mindset that you knew exactly what you want to be? And maybe for viewers that are watching that haven't found that in their life, like what sort of steps did you take to really ultimately figure out what you really want to be in your life?
First, it's important we let people know that what you want to be can change and evolve along the way. So you do not feel frustrated if you feel that you haven't really figured life out. Everybody, life is a job where you learn on it, and nobody really has all the answers. I was teaching in university. After my first degree, I went into corporate finance. In between switching jobs, there was a sense of emptiness that I should be doing something different. I shouldn't just be stuck in front of my laptop preparing income statements and balance sheet monthly, quarterly, and annually. There was something more, but I really didn't have any idea exactly what it was going to be. So once I was switching jobs, and in the process of switching jobs, there's usually a 3-month intensive training that they give new hires. They bring really good speakers and teachers to put you through the paces. And there was this guy that was seemingly having fun. I wasn't the only one. It was like a class setup. It was having fun, just gliding, teaching. And I told him, you seem to be having the time of your life. I think I really need to go back to teaching. I had taught briefly in the university. And he said, yes, why not consider teaching? It was at that point, I was still working, doing my corporate finance job. Then I started teaching in the evening, teaching accounting classes in the evening. And I was deriving more satisfaction. There was a greater sense of fulfillment teaching, right? There's always something that comes with a positive feedback you receive from a student that you have made a significant difference either in the course or in my life, right? It's not something you will get, for me, by preparing financial statements and doing analysis. And so I asked myself, okay, initially I thought of becoming a professor in my home country, but then I said, I could be a better professor somewhere else where there's more cultural diversity. Because every culture brings with it its own perspective of knowledge, right? And there was no better melting point of culture than Canada. I doubt if there's any more culturally diverse society than Canada. It was my conversation with that facilitator that really sparked up my interest. And I wasn't the most eloquent of speakers, right? So I said, okay, what do I need to do to improve my public speaking skills? Because the last thing you want to do is to be a professor that bores the class. We had many professors, but this particular professor stood out. And he said, okay, you could build your public speaking skills. I started working on my public speaking skills. I started teaching in the evenings for free, right? There was an accounting center, and I went there. I said, hey, I do not mind teaching the students for free, and they were startled. I said, yes, I'll teach. Of course, after a while, they started making payments when the results were productive. But it wasn't really about the payment. It was the satisfaction that I got. And so when I got on the flight, there was only one thing on my mind: coming here to teach. And just a month or two after I got the job to teach in Manitoba, I got another job, which was corporate accounting job that was paying me about 1.5 times or 1.7 times more than what the school had offered me, right? But I knew that if I had, I knew that the sense of satisfaction I was deriving was something that could not be quantified in monetary terms. And so it does help when, I don't want to use the word stubborn, but when you're fixated on exactly what you want to do. Once there's more clarity in the goals you want to achieve, the way you move is different from someone who is still guessing and playing mini manimu. Okay? So it's been a remarkable journey for me. Maybe others who migrated here might not have found it as easy as I found it. So I'm not downplaying on their own experience or stories, right? But it's been an exciting journey, and it really helped me a whole lot that I was fixed on what I wanted to do. All the professors I had in my school have been very, very supportive. I've had multiple roles in multiple schools, and some of them were, like the very first one I got, just direct referrals from my professors.
You seem to be very hardworking. So if I can touch on, did you get that from your parents? Were your parents teachers, or how's that dynamic with?
My mom, yeah, my parents are teachers. My mom is a teacher. My dad is a professor. So maybe that's where the teaching gene came from. But in terms of hard work, I think I come from a country where everybody works hard, right? When you have over 230 million people in a country, you tend to be competitive, right? Resources, opportunities are scarce, so really nothing is given to you on a platter of gold, right? You do not have a sense of entitlement. You do not get things just handed down to you. You know that you are in competition, and there has to be something that you need to do to stand out. So you want to create the value that will make you relevant in society. So I will not say it's something that is peculiar to me. Probably it's widespread amongst people that come from the society I come from, Nigeria in question. You, from when you're born, you learn the work ethics is already imbibed in you, right? Go the extra mile. I mean, mediocrity can only take you so far before you fall apart. So you want to strive for excellence, do something that stands out positively, make a difference that will make it difficult for people to do without you, right? So yes, parents did teach us the value of hard work. The educational system in Nigeria is a little bit more challenging, so you have to strive under not the most ideal circumstances. So when you come from that kind of society, you cannot be laid back or casual in anything you do, right? If something needs to be done, you just put in the effort and then go the extra mile.
You touched on culture briefly, so let me linger on that. When you came here, what was the biggest shock that sort of just came at your face about the way that people in Canada go about life rather than people in Nigeria, or how maybe the society is structured?
My cultural shock experiences is an extensive one, right? I was telling my class today. The first time when I came here, I arrived about 9:30. It was in the spring, but when you're used to 29, 30 degrees your entire life, 32 degrees your entire life, and you arrive here and it's 10 degrees, I mean, the shock just hits you right in the face. As soon as I got out of the airport, as I was wheeling my stuff out of the airport, I had to move back as soon as the airport door swung open. There was this chilly cold that just hit me in the forehead. But in a more broader sense, Nigeria and Canada have their similarities, but they have their own differences. The culture here is highly professional. You must be on time for everything you do, right? 1:30 is 1:30, 3 o'clock is 3 o'clock. There's no possibility of, oh, they might not show up or they will be late. And that's something I really love, because I've always been a stickler for showing up for any sort of engagement I have at least 15 minutes ahead of time. It's a little bit different where we come from. Yes, we are hardworking, but we work hard at our own pace and convenience. So in time-wise, people may not always stick to timing. So you show up here in classes start on time, classes finish on time. It's going to be a 2 hours class. The class will run for exactly 2 hours. All the points that need to be covered will be covered. So it was a little bit of a mild culture shock for me, right? The extent to which people keep to time. And then you also see the relationship between students and professors. So Nigeria is a society with a huge high power distance, if we were to use a Hofstede's cultural dimension analysis, right? He analyzed different societies, and one of the differences he talked about was that in some societies, there's little or no power difference between those in authority and those who are not in authority. So everybody interacts at the same level. There's free communication, there's free interaction. That was why it was always easy for me to just walk up to my professors and tell them exactly what I wanted to do and what assistance I needed from them. Now, you will have great professors in Nigeria who have great personality that you can easily relate with. But there's that huge power difference, that there's a gap between students and lecturers, right? Your interaction with them is usually few and far between, and it's usually structured. You know exactly what needs to be said and what does not need to be said. But here in Canadian society, you can be open-minded. You can have a conversation with anybody. With the president of the school, you can go in there and tell him whatever concerns you have. So I found that zero difference between those in authority and those who are not in authority to be very impressive, because everybody has an idea they can contribute, and everybody now has access to the support you can get. Once you're able to communicate freely, is great. Another difference in culture between the Nigerian society and the Canadian society is the context in which people communicate. In Nigerian society, not everything is said directly, right? You're very respectful of people's feelings, and so oftentimes you might be subtle in your communication and you expect the other party to understand. And because we are from the same culture, I understand, right? There are things that can be said to you just looking at, just with the gaze of an eye, right? And I can communicate to someone who comes from my society. They can understand yes, they can understand no, they can understand when you're happy and when you're sad. But this is a society where you have to be verbally expressive. If you do not say something, nobody's going to assume what you're feeling. And like I always tell my students, because most of them, like me, come from what we call the high context societies, where people communicate in subtle ways, indirectly. If you want to thrive in this society, you really need to learn low context communication style. By low context communication style, I mean, if you feel you can do this job and there's an opening, you should be able to walk up to your manager. Like I said, there's no power distance in Canada. You should be able to walk up to your manager and say, hey, I know there's an opening here. I have the competence and the skills to do this job. It sounds easy here in Canada, but trust me, it's not the way it is in Nigeria, right? For you to just wake up, meet your manager, and even have that kind of conversation. So the two major culture shock for me between the Canadian society and the Nigerian society was the power distance and then the context of communication. I always encourage my students, say anything you want to say in class. We do not always have to have the same opinion. In fact, knowledge grows when there's a difference in opinions, right? When I have something and I think in a particular way, you think in a particular way, I provide my reasons why I'm thinking this way while I'm still open-minded, and you provide yours. We'll work on it together. And at the end of the day, we might not even take anybody's opinion and then adopt a third opinion. That is the way knowledge is enriched. So This society is low context, communicate expressively, and there's no power distance. You can have a conversation with anybody. In the work environment, in any society, if you run into the prime minister, you can have a conversation with anybody. Just be respectful. But you can always say anything you want to say.
Amazing points you brought up there. And it's funny because even in my culture, like for example, if we are at a family dinner and I say something and my mom like doesn't like it or whatever it is, it's like, and then I exactly know what it is said.
Yeah. So not just parents, right? Parents, managers, even among siblings, you can communicate indirectly. And there's no culture is superior or inferior to another. I always try to establish that point. Culture is just different as you move from one society to another, as they try to respond to whatever is happening in their environment. Because the elements of culture that exist in any society is usually influenced by two things: the opportunities and threats in their external environment, and then also helps them to achieve harmony. So no culture is superior to another, no culture is inferior to another, right? But any element of another person's culture that appeals to your personality and you feel will be instrumental in helping you get to where you want to go, feel free to adopt it.
Exactly. Take the best part of here, best part of there, and go from there. Artificial intelligence is on everyone's mind these days, with tools like ChatGPT and AI automation changing the game. Are you incorporating AI discussions or tools into your teaching and work?
In academics, perhaps nothing polarizes opinion more than the rise of artificial intelligence. You have the conservatives who will say, no, we should keep artificial intelligence out the door. And you have the liberals, the open-minded persons who will say, no, we can't incorporate artificial intelligence in the way we teach. This is not the first time something like this will be happening. There was once upon a time that students were not using calculators, right? And when calculators were introduced, there were concerns. There was once upon a time when the internet wasn't as readily available as it is now. And then with the rise of internet, there were also concerns. So while on the surface there are concerns, I always try to dig a little bit deeper. What exactly are the concerns? Academic integrity. You want people to put in the effort. You want them to learn. And like I said, you want them to get transformative knowledge. I do not feel AI is something bad. Like every other tool in life, it is neutral. It depends on in whose hands it's in and how it's being used. So yes, I do incorporate and encourage students to use artificial intelligence responsibly. Today I was teaching ratio analysis, right? And while I was running them through how to analyze the financial statements of companies, I told them, open ChatGPT, DeepSeek or Gemini, whichever one you usually use, right? And I gave them tailored prompts that can help them understand certain aspects of financial statement analysis. So if they're going to learn it better that way, if they're going to remember it better and then use it not just within the classroom but outside the confines of the classroom, I don't think AI is something that we should just discard. It's here to stay. We just need to channel it properly and ensure that it's being used responsibly and in a productive manner. So I do encourage students to use artificial intelligence while upholding academic integrity.
I love the fact that you gave your students the prompt, because prompt engineering is actually another topic discussed on the podcast, but that anyone really that uses AI should learn. But there's actually a study or sort of this AI universities that are popping up. Some of them are in the United States, some are in UK, that are just AI teaching students for I think about an hour and a half or 2 hours a day, and the rest are actual activities in the real world, like hands-on experience. And apparently their results are like 1.5 to 2 times better than normal classrooms. So do you see the world sort of shifting in that direction in the near future? Or what's your take on it?
Yeah, with the rise of AI, things will not be as they used to be. On one hand, at the same time, most of the fears we have or concerns we have about the rise of AI will not actually materialize. Yes, most things will change. You will have more schools depending on AI. Even a, even fully AI, the instructor-based institutions will emerge. It's not something to be concerned about, but there will always be that aspect of learning that will require human intervention. It doesn't matter how well a robot or an artificial intelligent being does something. There's there's a spice that only the human touch can bring to learning, right? AI cannot connect with the emotions of a learner. When I teach, I constantly look at the facial expressions of all my students, and I know when somebody has just been left behind. And I know when we are moving too fast. I know when we are moving too slow. I know when it's time to just stop talking for 3 minutes and give the class time to reboot mentally, right? AI has no emotions. Well, AI will play a relevant role in the future. In fact, its role in the academics will continue to increase just as it increases in all aspects of our lives as human beings, right? But it will never fully replace human interaction between students and students, human interaction between students and professors.
Yeah, I agree with that actually, to a certain degree. But I mean, I could always push back to the fact that when AI gets better, and we know every year it's getting 10 times plus better, it will have the knowledge to sort of read the emotions of a person from their eyes or from their facial expressions, and always sort of have cameras to capture that, and from that gauge the speed or certain ways. And there's always this question that comes down to if AI can do any job, AI and robots obviously per se, better than humans, then existential crisis question that what truly is the meaning of us all being on this planet when AI can do everything better than us. And I am a person who believes that will happen, not in near future, maybe in like 15, 20 years potentially. But what's your take on it? How would you answer that question?
Yeah, no, we can't doubt or question the efficiency, the speed of artificial intelligence, right? The accuracy with which robots now complete tasks in different gigafactories around the world, right? So I'm not denying, neither am I concerned about increased use of AI, whether it's in factories, whether it's in academics, whether it's in healthcare. I'm not also doubting the fact that a time will come when artificial intelligent beings will, to a reasonable extent, become emotional, right? That may happen. But will that now mean that I'll be able to stay in this apartment all by myself? I'll use an AI powered vehicle with will I become completely isolated from other human beings? I think with anybody that has tried isolation before, at some point you tend to get bored. You will begin to long for human interaction, right? You go to the grocery stores, we have self-checkout kiosks. But from time to time, you still go through the cashier just to have a conversation with somebody, right? So you say that even with all the use of, because we have been using computing systems over the years, but you use it, you enjoy the speed and efficiency with which it gives you, but there will always be time when you will long for that human engagement and interaction. Sometimes you call your bank and you have a chatbot or an AI representative having conversations with you, and you're getting pissed, and you just say, connect me to an agent, right? Because only an agent will understand the urgency. Only an agent will understand the emotions that you're currently going through just by the sound and pace of your voice. So artificial intelligence will not replace natural intelligence. It will only complement it.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I'd have to say I totally agree, and it's funny because last month I was doing a pivot on my startup, and we were thinking of creating a voice AI agent for plumbing businesses. And I called up 122 plumbers nearby, and some of them had the solution, like a voice AI agent that you would call the plumber and be like, "Hey, how can I help you?" and book appointments, whatever. But they had to cancel and they have to push back because some of their users and callers would call up Seats and AI and hang up and just don't want to interact with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of that. I've called the banks once or twice, and when it's a computing system that I'm speaking to, I just hang up. I just hang up because it's a little bit faster and more direct when I'm having a conversation with an actual human being. So I cannot blame people for hanging up and not conversing with computing systems whenever they try to reach their plumbers, their carpenters, or they want to access healthcare. We are social beings, right? We are social creatures. You have different types of animals on earth. You have animals that thrive isolatedly, right? But humans, like many other creatures, we live in groups, colony, families, as you want to call it, right? We live in communities. There's a lovely community you're living in. You will always long for some sense of human interaction. So I think that there are three sets of human beings, right? You have those who are excited about the future, that it's going to be fully automated, right? Everything will be AI driven. And you have those who want zero artificial intelligence interrupting what they call a perfect life. But I always feel that there's a balance in the middle that we can achieve, right? We need aspects of natural intelligence. We need human intervention and interaction. And of course, the computing system is a tremendous tool. It has improved the overall quality and standard of lives we are living. And AI is also here to make positive contributions. We should just find the right formula, the right mix to allow artificial intelligence and human intelligence thrive within the same ecosystem.
Definitely agree. I saw you recently invited an industry expert who used Lego bricks to teach a lesson on communication and soft skills. Why do you think creative approaches like that are effective in learning and leadership development?
So, the learning process, besides being transformative, needs to be fun, needs to be dynamic, and needs to be interesting. It's easier for people to learn when they are not bored. You know, I had spoken to you earlier that before I delved into teaching, I had significantly worked on improving my speaking and presentation skills. Because there are some professors that step into the class 5 minutes, 10 minutes, everyone falls into a deep sleep or they mentally travel somewhere else. Okay? So I use a variety of teaching methods. I ran into the Lego teaching series and I invited the professor and industry experts. And it was an amazing experience. Even right after I left, the students came to me and gave me positive feedback. So with the Lego series, let me just give you a synopsis of how it works, right? So the Lego bricks are there. Rather than having students make PowerPoint presentations, you give them the case of the scenario. So the randomly assembled Lego bricks becomes like their presentations, and then each group will take turns to explain. If it's a business case study, if it's a human resource case study, whatever they have made, right? I think that day the topic he gave them was to build their immigration journey in Canada so far, from their home countries to where they currently find themselves in. And it was really an interesting exposition, hearing how groups of students sat down together, despite the fact that they all have multiple experience. They come from different countries and have different experiences, right? They were able to put all of those experiences in one molded image or character. And all of them were now relating their various experiences of how they have navigated the immigration landscape of Canada. So it made for an interesting class. It was something outside the normal, and I've used it a couple of times by myself, and students have said positive things about it.
Yeah, sort of that dynamic approach and making it fun for students. I think it sticks with them with a higher degree.
Yeah, when you learn and you're having a good time, you tend to retain a greater chunk of the knowledge you've received. Let's be honest, you will not remember everything you learn, right? Somebody said education is what is left when everything you have learned is forgotten. So the fun process helps students in particular, to retain the core learning objectives of the course. And so not just Lego series, as many other tools as can be integrated into the learning process, right? I usually encourage professors and instructors to do so. You don't want to just be easily predictable. Students know exactly what is going to happen. You'll come in, you'll pull up a slide, you run them through the slides, and then you're over and done with it. No, try to spice things up. And Lego learning series is usually a great tool.
I sort of want to flip the script and ask you if you could build the character who is your ideal student, or the ideal character that would learn the most in a teaching setting. What sort of components would you put in it, and how would you structure it?
Okay. If I was to have an ideal student, the first component I will put in is open-mindedness, right? The first brick, if I was to make my own student, would be the brick of open-mindedness. You can't learn with a closed mind anywhere in the world, right? We're all students of life. So you need to realize that knowledge gets obsolete over time. Even what may have been true last night may no longer be true when you wake up this morning. So if you are clutch-fisted, if you are fixated, it becomes very difficult for you to learn. So like I always tell the students, just have an open mind, and you can learn from anybody and you can learn from anything. The next brick I will use is the brick of curiosity. I know they say curiosity killed the cat, but that's why the cat had 9 lives. You want to be curious. It's easier to learn when you're intentional. We already have an open mind, and now there's a hunger or yearning for new knowledge, right? Don't ever let the sun set without you having acquired or learned something new. There's so much to learn. Even if you live for 1,000 years, you will not even learn up to 10% of everything that there is on earth to learn. So why will you not be curious? Why will you just be comfortable with everything you already know and feel that is all that there is to learn, right? And then it might sound a bit ironic, but the next thing you need to learn, the next component I will put in my ideal student is one who loves teaching. I already told you earlier that teaching is the fastest way to learn. So you must be generous with your knowledge. You must be generous with your experience, right? When classes are going on and you're making your own contributions, I give you my perspective from my time in Nigeria and Canada, and you tell me what happened in Iran, what happened in France, what happened in Spain or in Japan, right? It enriches the discussion. I learn as much from my students as they learn from me. There's hardly any class I have that I will not take anything positive out of the class. It might be directly related to the subject matter. It might be something completely different, but there's always something to learn. So you must be open-minded, you must be curious, and then you must be willing and excited to teach and share your own experiences. And trust me, you can ask any professor, if you find these 3 things in any student, in a group of students, the class always makes for a very interesting session.
How has your teaching life, the evolution has come to where you are right now? I'm sure you didn't have all the answers at the beginning, or maybe some mess ups. So how's the evolution come to right now?
Like everything in life, you tend to improve and get better as you practice, as you stick to it. So teaching is no exception. I remember the very first class I was to teach formally when I was in Nigeria was an accounting class. I remember how nervous I was, and I kept asking myself, why am I thinking of leaving corporate finance, right? So it's normal. There will always be a significant difference between where you were when you started and where you are when you look 6 months back, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. More than anything, it's a sign that you're progressing. So my first class, I was a little bit jittery, right? When the students ask questions, what do I say? Because the dynamics of a class will always change while the class is in session. There will be times when you will have to deal with difficult students. There will be times when the students will be laid back. There will be times when the students will know so much about the subject matter. And there will be times when the students have no interest in exactly what you want to teach. But over the years, I've developed various skill sets, some born out of experiences and some born out of personal learnings I have undertaken that have made me better off as a professor now than I was 3-4 years ago. So there's still so much to learn. The evolutionary journey never ends, right? While we're breathing, next year I'll be a better professor by this time next year than I am now, right? And when I look back and see who I was, I do not get pissed at the way I did things then, because I know that then that was my best as at then, right? And I know 2-3 years down the line, when I look back at what I'm doing, I will only make fun of what I'm doing now. But as we are talking now in 2025, this is the best I have to offer. So I'm always open-minded, always learning, right? It doesn't matter how good you are at something, there's always room for you to be better at it. Okay? I'm open-minded. I love teaching. I will happily share my experiences and opinions with anybody. And I always tell my students, your opinion matters, your opinion counts. And I'm also curious. So the attributes of my ideal students are the same attributes that define me as an instructor, as a professor. Because like I said, all of us are students of life. We are constantly learning. And that has helped shape my journey and my evolution as a professor from where I was to where I am now.
Beautiful answer. I hope the viewers can learn something from this podcast because there is a lot of knowledge. Many young professionals struggle with balancing a successful career and impact-driven work. As someone devoted to driving positive change in your field, what's your take on balancing ambition with purpose?
Balancing ambition with purpose. Okay? So let's start by even asking ourselves, what exactly is success? Because I'm not somebody who believes that there's a generic definition of success. You must start off by personally defining what success means to you, right? When you're clear of what success means to you, that's what now fuels your ambition. We are naturally ambitious to do what we think is successful. But you will be doing yourself a great disservice if I'll be doing myself a great disservice if I set out on a journey to achieve what you consider to be successful. That's why people suffer from burnout. That's why people suffer from frustration. Because sometimes you can win and end up losing, right? So if you want to balance purpose with ambition, you start by knowing exactly who you are. The philosopher once said, man, know thyself. Amongst the things that there is to learn, the thing you need to learn the most is exactly who you are. What exactly do I want? What matters most to me? What will really count after everything has been said and done? Right? And these are questions that you need to sit down, have deep self-reflection, and then answer personally. When you have done that, you see that there is no difference between ambition and purpose. There's no difference between ambition and impact, because while you set out to achieve what you consider successful, you'll be making the desired impact you want to make. I wanted to teach, I wanted to learn from various students, I wanted to contribute to their learning process positively, right? And that was what made me pursue this career in academics. So the impact is already being made along the way. Every time I get feedback from students, emails, LinkedIn connections, and saying, hey, you have no idea the world of difference you made. So impact is not something you achieve at the end. It's something that you make along the journey while you pursue your ambition. But you now must be sure that the ambition you're pursuing is driven by the terms and conditions of success as defined by you.
Very well said. I'm sure you didn't have these opinions straight from the womb per se. So what has, for you personally, shaped your mindset to what it is currently? Has it been people that you follow, people that you look up to, maybe your parents? What shapes the way you look at life right now?
So many factors make the opinions and the knowledge I hold dear change and continue to evolve on a daily basis, right? When you know better, they say you do better, right? First, I will start by talking about the kind of persons I'm surrounded with, right? Parents, family, friends, you have interactions with somebody with an open mind. You see the person's point of view, the person shares his opinions and ideas, you scrutinize it, you juxtapose it with yours, right? And whatever works, you know, because the knowledge you have, you're like a work of art, right? And you continue to chisel yourself and mold yourself into what you think you should be on a daily basis. So I've been greatly influenced by various persons, some that I have met in person, some close family friends, some professors, some religious leaders, right? But while they might have had various influence on me, I usually try to determine what kind of influence they will have on me. Because it doesn't matter the extent to which I admire you, I do not just adopt anything anybody says, hook, line, and sinker. I scrutinize it, right? Look at it through my own prism and lens. I'm not saying my way is best. Like I said, no culture is superior or inferior to another. In the same way, nobody's opinion or way of living is superior or inferior to another, right? I take what is good from you. I take what is good from what I think is good from the next, and that will work for me, because there might be so many fantastic things about you, but not all of them will fit perfectly in my life. So I only take what I feel is great and compatible with my life, take what is good, great and compatible with my life from here and there, and make myself a better man. Then I do extensive reading. I listen to podcasts. I have interactions with students. So my mind and my opinions continue to change every day. And we are predominantly products of our thoughts and opinions. So as the thought and opinion continues to evolve and change, that evolution begins to manifest physically in the way we live our lives every day.
As someone who straddles the academic and entrepreneurial worlds, what is your take on today's startup ecosystem?
So the startup ecosystem is just like every other ecosystem, the biological the ecosystem we find in the world. I'm from Africa. In Africa, we have a rich wildlife. I do watch a whole lot of wildlife, right? You have predators, you have prey, and you have those that are somewhere in between. First, I would say the word startup has been bastardized. It has become some sort of buzzword. Everybody now has a startup. Everybody is now setting up one business or another, right? In the past, you had startups who were actually out to make a difference, who had who had identified their purpose, who were out there to serve societies, who set up businesses, watch them grow organically so that they could make more impactful differences. But now what you have are, not to a reasonable extent, you have people who just want to cash out, right? Have a startup, pitch it to an angel investor, and then sell it off for some good money and go and start up another startup. So some persons are now in the businesses of just establishing startups for the purpose of selling them. I will not say that as worried or giving me any source of concern, because we live in a capitalist society, and anything that is legal for people to use in making profit, they are free to do it, right? But at the same time, you have startups who are genuinely interested in making impactful differences, right? You see the firms like McDonald's, Coca-Cola, they were all once startups. And you now have the highest number of startups, maybe not surprisingly, but in the tech industry, right? I really do not know what to think, but nature has a way of ensuring that those who are not serious contenders fizzle out into oblivion, right? Those who have real value to offer, those who are in it usually for the right reasons, tend to find their way in the long run. The frustration most people get when they have startups is because they had read books of this person had a startup, after 2 3 years sold it for $1 million. And so when you're not really looking out to solve problems in societies, when you're just holding out and trying to see who is available to buy your startup for 100,000, 200, 500,000, after a while it becomes too heavy and then you get frustrated. There's a high rise of the incidents or number of startups that never go past their first 2 years. The mortality rate is ridiculous. And then you begin to ask, okay, why the startup in the first place? And when people with complementary skills and knowledge could even come together and establish businesses, everybody is now obsessed with being CEOs and bosses, right? And so you have a million mushroom startups that would have been better off if 10, 20 of them had combined resources and capabilities, established their own businesses, and then had grown them organically. So I try not to, when somebody calls me and says, hey, I have a startup, what do you think of this? I try not to go too deep because I do not want to disabuse their mind from, I don't know the reason why they're in it in the first place, right? Everybody will tell you I'm in it for the passion, but beneath all of the passion, the real reasons why they're in it is usually glaring if you look really hard at it, right? Somebody calls me and says, I have a startup, I want you to come and provide finances. You haven't even told me exactly what you're doing, right? How is it different from what is already existing in contemporary times? What extra value will you create, right? I always like using Michael Porter's viral analysis. Michael Porter said, for you to have competitive advantage, you must come up with something that is valuable, right? Are there people out there who are willing to pay for it? Now, this value you're offering, is it difficult to imitate? Because if you do something phenomenal, it might be valuable. But if everybody can do it, trust me, if I see that you're making so much money from it, what will I do tomorrow? I will start doing it, right? So he said you must come with value that is unique and peculiar to only you, and it is limited in supply. It has to be rare. And most importantly, he said you must have the organization, the capability to do it repeatedly. I once had a Greek manager who would tell me that there's nothing more tragic than you succeeding by accident. Because when you succeed by accident, you cannot repeat the success. I don't know if you've ever gotten on the internet, if you've ever tried cooking something and it was fantastic. And after 2 3 days, you try doing it again and it ends up in a mess. So for startup, the ecosystem is now dominated by those who are not really in it for the right reasons. They're in it just as a money-making venture, right? Come up with something, pitch it to this, pitch it to that person, and then get 100,000, 300,000, $1 million, or $10 million out of it. And that's why we have a high mortality rate. That's why most startups do not even go past 6 months, 7 months. And then you say, hey, what, you told me you had a startup 3 months ago. How is that coming along? I have another startup. You have some persons that have 5, 8, 10 startups. How can you have 5, 10, 8 startups at the same time?
Yeah, that's too much. I have a couple notes to say. It was funny you said everyone wants to be a CEO. I heard this quote online, and it's like, and there's the United States rowing thing and there's a Chinese rowing thing, and then the United States has 7 people that say which direction to go and 1 rower, but the Chinese have 7 rowers and 1 person to say which direction. And in the United States, when they lose, they fire the rower. That's funny. And another point I wanted to mention is I saw a stat about a couple weeks ago that said by 2035, the 9-to-5 job will go extinct. So, and that makes sense to me to the degree that with AI and the rise of robots, the repetitive, mundane tasks that are usually the 9-to-5s will be replaced. And that's why I think the rise of startups and small businesses or side hustles per se are growing at an insane rate. So what do you have, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah. So definitely with the rise of artificial intelligence, those mundane or repetitive tasks would definitely be taken up by AI. But at the same time, you cannot be driven by fear in setting up a startup. It will not last. Fear cannot sustain any startup. Right? Like I already mentioned, it is value that is difficult to imitate, that is rare, and that can be repeated, that makes businesses to thrive and grow organically from the startups they were to the multi-million-dollar ventures they became. You didn't buy this nice sweatshirt you're wearing because whoever manufactured it was afraid. The person just wanted to escape. So you see, a startup is not an escape route out of the 9-to-5 structure. Because let's even look at it. If you have a startup, you'll be working more than 9-to-5. So it's not a get out of jail card. Oh, there will be limited 9-to-5 jobs in the coming years. So what do? Let all of us have startups. You now have more startups and you have more people in a country. What exactly is going to happen?
Is that true?
I'm just saying, after you end up having, if one person has 10 startups, then it's possible you could have more startups in the country than you have citizens in the country. So what do we now do?
I'll put a fact check. I'm actually curious.
No, I'm just pulling your legs. There's no statistics to confirm that. But I'm saying if things continue the way they're going, it's not something that is impossible.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like when you do a startup just for the money or for the wrong reasons and not that you truly believe in your product, when the tough times come, you'll be blown by the wind and the startup will fail. And
the tough times are guaranteed to come.
100%.
They're guaranteed to come. So if everything is built on fear, if everything is built on the illusion that with a startup I will not have to work as hard, or I will not have to have structure with the 9-to-5, then you'll find it just falling apart like a house of cards.
Innovate or die is a mantra we often hear, but innovation is more than a buzzword. How do you define true innovation in technology or business?
So, if I was to give a simple definition to innovation, it's simply improving on the status quo. Improving on what exists. It doesn't have to be a significant improvement. It could be a marginal improvement, right? Over the years, Japanese cars have been known for their efficiency, right? And if you look at Japanese technology, rarely do they come with breakthrough innovations or discoveries. The Japanese society is built on the philosophy that you could make 0.01% improvement on anything you're doing, right? And those negligible improvements, by the time you track them and sum them up over a period of time, 6 months, 1 year, 3 months, you saw that you've actually covered miles. So it still boils down to the question you asked earlier on startup. People just get excited. We want to blow the world. We want to blow people's mind off, right? So some persons are hitting their heads against the wall, trying to see how human beings can have one legs, trying to see how birds can fly with one wings, right? The innovation you're looking for is already right before you. What you're currently doing or what is currently being done by another person, how can we do it differently and then improve upon it? This improvement might come in terms of the quality, the time it takes, right? So innovation doesn't have to be something that turns the world upside down. It's exactly what you're currently doing. How can I be better at it? Once you can come up with a new method, it doesn't have to be significant, that's slightly different from exactly what is being done. You've already innovated, right? You've already evolved. Innovation is just evolution, but it's a technical phrase for evolution, right? Because after a while, the status quo becomes obsolete. So society must find a new way of dealing with the new problems that have arisen. We've had firms who have stuck to the old ways of doing things and then they soon fizzled out of existence. Or they lost their industry leadership roles and started playing catch up. So with the first part, innovate or die, innovate or become obsolete, I do agree with it. But I do not see innovation as something that must be out of this world, right? We could just keep it simple. We could just keep it basic. And when you pursue things like that, like the Japanese, you will come up with something that is enduring because it's always easier to make small incremental progresses than for you to do something phenomenal within a short space of time.
What challenges you?
To be better today than I was yesterday. If there's anything I'm always afraid of is just remaining the same. We're to have a presentation. I'm teaching a new class. I'm to have a presentation week 9. This is week 7. In week 9, we're to have a presentation. And some of them came to me and said, "Oh, I'm so nervous. I can't talk for 10 minutes." And I told them, nervousness is a sign that you're making progress. When you have done something repeatedly, you soon know the ropes very well, right? And it begins to flow naturally. So if you have not been nervous in a long while, if I want to be more direct, you have not grown. You've stagnated. So I'm challenged by not being challenged. I'm challenged by not being nervous. I'm challenged by remaining the same, right? You must always look for new things to do because new things will build new capabilities. New things will give you the new skill sets that will make you better, right? When you try something you have not done before, it's okay for you to make a fool of yourself. It's okay for you to be nervous. Everybody that you see doing great things out there, they're all doing them nervous. From the most experienced of professors, from the most experienced of CEOs, president, football stars, everybody gets nervous. Well, now the difference between those who are successful and those who are not is that those who are successful now ride on this nervousness to succeed, while those who are not successful turn this nervousness to prison bars that just hold them down.
It's the way you look at the same energy.
Absolutely.
And channel it into
Absolutely.
Positive or negative. And lastly, what do you think is the meaning of life?
And that's a philosophical question, right? Difficult to put in words. Anything that is alive, the difference between what is alive and what is death, right, is what is alive can make conscious decisions to contribute positively or not to contribute positively to society. So I look at things through this prism and said, okay, life is the opportunity that we are given, right, to make positive contributions, to be a giver, to be a creator, or to consciously or unconsciously make the decision to just be a taker, to be someone who has negative impact on society. There's nobody who is having zero impact on the world right now. You're either giving more than you can take or you're taking more than you can give, more than you're giving. So I describe anything as being alive as when it's making a positive contribution to society. Because if that thing is dead and we do not miss it, was it really alive?
Yeah, no. Yeah.
So if you're alive now, if you say you're alive, and by the time you pass on, there's really no difference, how then can we say that you were alive? So you need to ask yourself, if it all ends today, what exactly is that void that my absence will create? What is that gap I'm feeling in this society? That yes, people will take notice and say, oh yeah, there was a lady here, there was a man here who used to do this, and now that person is no longer around.
This was supposed to be the last question, but I'm actually going to linger on a point that is, do you think we have free will? So this question comes a lot, and I personally am on the boat that if two people had the same exact experiences and the same DNA sequence, they will be the same exact person. So is the way that we navigate the world currently and the person that we are is based on the hundreds of thousands of hours of memory from our sensations and from the genes that we have incorporated in us? Or do you think free will is there or not?
So I believe in responsibility, self-responsibility, right? There are many external happenings that are outside our control that has direct and indirect influence over our lives. I admit and agree to that on one hand. Now, on the other hand, individuals have power to make certain choices. And these choices have outcomes or consequences. So yes, we do have free will, limited by an extent to the circumstances that are beyond our control. So within the limitation of the circumstances we face, right, we can make choices. This is the Canadian environment, ecosystem, for instance, right? The law prescribes what can be done and what cannot be done. Now, within that boundaries of the laws, I can decide to be a barber. The law allows me to be a barber. I can go to school and learn how to become a barber. You can decide to be a musician. I can decide to be a musician, right? But all of us are living within the same legal jurisdiction. So yes, there are confines, but within that confines, there's a semblance of freedom. We can make choices and then live with the consequences of these choices. So do not bother about the ones that are outside your control. You can't do anything about the law. You can't do anything about the weather. You can't do anything about the economy. Okay? Oh, the inflation is this, the prices of houses is going. There's really nothing much you can do about that. Always keep your eyes on what is within your control and then exercise your free will.
Well, we'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, and I wish you all the best in your future endeavors.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed my time here.
Amazing. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.